Jenny, thank you very much for your time, and great to be with you here in Parliament House on the day which happens to be the 11th anniversary of the apology.
It is.
And it was great to hear you and Linda Burney addressing that issue in Parliament today. What would you suggest to those of us from the church agencies around the country in terms of reflecting on that apology?
I think the most important thing was really that for people who had been taken as children, that they were believed, and that for the first time the Prime Minister of the country stood there and on behalf of everyone in the Parliament and for so many Australians he was able to say the truth is that thousands of children were taken from their parents. They were abused, they were treated in the most terrible way, and we are sorry. We are deeply sorry for the terrible things that were done to these children. And I know from, and I'm sure you do too, from the people that I've spoken to, just how important it is, particularly as over the generations so many people had just denied it had even happened. Or other people said, oh yes, well, children were removed, but it was for their own good. And of course, totally ignoring the impact that had on the children, on their parents, on their brothers and sisters. So in terms of looking forward, I think what that tells us all that's so important is to always be telling the truth about what's going on. We've just finished the Royal Commission into Child Sexual Abuse, another example of where it has been so important for the victims and survivors of child sexual abuse, wherever it happens, to be believed that it did happen and that the people responsible will be held to account. So in all of these situations, for organisations like yours, but other mission-based organisations, it's just so important to be part of that truth-telling. And for me, that is an enormously important for healing, and that unless you start with the truth-telling, then people really can't begin to heal.
And I know with both those initiatives, the apology and the Royal Commission, you did power of work, so thank you very much.
Well, both have, I hoped, helped two groups of people that I now know very well. I didn't know them all that well, I have to say, beforehand, but have come to know and love. And to see the power that they have in themselves as a result is of course just so reinforcing. Of course we can't stop, there's so much more that needs to be done for both groups, and I know you want to raise the Uluru statement, but
yes, well, we've already heard a very strong plea from Indigenous leaders to our organisation on that, so what would you recommend to us in terms of being able to respond to that in good faith, knowing that there are many complexities both in Indigenous Australia and around Parliament House on that issue?
Well, in some ways it's the same message, isn't it, that we all got in the lead up to the apology, which was please listen to us, please believe and understand what happened to us, say sorry for the wrongs that were done, but then make sure that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples have the power to direct their own lives. And I think that this is really the message from the Uluru statement, that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, things are just not going to get better until they are able to direct social welfare services or economic changes or whatever it might be. All the different policy areas need to have them in the driver's seat. And it's the same, I think, in disability. People with disability want to run their own lives. They don't want big institutions telling them what they will do every day and how they will spend their lives. They actually, just like you and me, want to get up in the morning and say, well, today I'm going to do this. I'm going to go to work here, or I'm going to go to the footy, or I'm going to do whatever it is I want to do. And that's the power behind the National Disability Insurance Scheme, that people with disability have to be able to control their own lives. And so the big message I would say to organisations like yours, other big providers, please join with us in this huge cultural change. And it is a big change. But people with disability won't get the benefit of it unless institutions like yours and hundreds of others stick in there, and I would suggest, as part of your mission, have people with disability and control over their lives as your sort of guiding force. A bit like for Aboriginal people, the guiding force is they want to be able to direct where the policy about them is going.
Well, you've been very generous in opening your doors to some of our members who have had problems with the NDIS. I know, I've accompanied them, and there have been a lot of teething problems. I suppose, with your perspective now in terms of welfare reform, what do you say to those who say, well, look, yes, something like that seems to work for people who are well connected, who are well endowed, well educated or whatever, but where we're trying to reach out to those who are suffering great poverty or at the margins, how do we really address their needs if we move right away from the sort of idea of block funding for organisations such as ours to the client-based model? Where do we go with that?
Take the lead with the idea in your mind that a person who is homeless, who is maybe has an intellectual disability and maybe some form of mental health issue as well, they too want to be able to run their own lives. They don't want you or me or anyone else telling them what to do. So we have to think of the model that will work for them, not by doing things the way we used to do them in the past, which is so paternalistic, but let's try and, I would say to you, you guys can lead this discussion. Think about how it will work, not that it's too difficult to work. Keep the goal and the prize of, nothing like a bell to disrupt the conversation. But so I would really say to you, that's the thing we have to keep in the front of our minds. People running their own lives may need different ways of getting support, but not by going back to the old ways of doing things that told people what they could have and when they would do whatever it was. We can't go back. We mustn't go back. This is a massive cultural change. Let's make it work. And so my plea to all of you is lead the change. Don't come asking for how not to change.
Right. And in terms of the other big issues that always confront us with the people we're trying to serve, I mean, as you know well, the New Start allowance abysmally low.
It is
how do we get to the stage where we accord human dignity to even those on New Start and finding a process which is transparent, which is fair?
Yeah.
What sort of recommendations would you make to us in terms of trying to advocate better for those sorts of reforms? And things like the cashless debit card and alcohol testing for welfare recipients, those sorts of issues.
Well, on the latter issues about the cashless card and the alcohol testing, I think the real issue there is, does it actually work? And the evidence suggests it doesn't. So that's all about evidence.
So evidence-based research.
Evidence-based research. Let's do proper evaluations of these things. Sometimes new ideas are worth trying. Let's face it. But then you've got to test them. on the issue of New Start is too low, no doubt about it. And as you know, I've been pressing for this review of New Start for some time. If we are elected, then that will happen. There's a timeline now for it to happen. So I would just say keep demonstrating to both the government and the opposition that it isn't right that people are expected to not only live on this very low rate of New Start, but also how hard it is to get a job when you're on that level of assistance. So yes, we need a proper inquiry to make sure the design of it is right. Just keep pressing the case. I mean, the government is saying absolutely no, so you know, there's some way to go with them, I'd say.
It has to be absolutely yes. Yeah. Maybe to address the elephant in the room, Catholic agencies in the wake of the Royal Commission, issues for us in terms of, are our doors really open to everybody, people feeling welcome to receive our services? But secondly, loss of standing in the community in terms of being advocates and being able to advocate, you know, particularly for those who are on the margins and those. What suggestions would you have for us?
Well, a bit like I've just said on the National Disability Insurance Scheme, that to sort of embrace the recommendations of the Royal Commission about the need for openness, working with families on the recommendations from the Royal Commission about how we all need to change in the way we deal with children and families. And it is going to take some time to rebuild that trust. I've talked a lot recently about how important it is, this trust in institutions, and the church, your church, other churches, other big institutions, the Parliament has lost the trust of the public because of the way we've all behaved. It's not an unreasonable thing. The only way you get that back is by changing your behaviour, all of us.
Trust has to be earned.
And trust has to be earned by you guys, by us, and you know, but you've really got to be determined to do it and understand that without these institutions that people trust, then a sense of inclusion and belonging for all of us is so much more difficult. So I think this is actually really, really fundamental to a fair society. If we don't, if we as members of the community don't treat everybody, no matter rich or poor, sick or well, in a similar way, that they don't trust the institutions that they need to rely on, then the society just breaks down. And I think we are in a very difficult place in that regard right now. Too many people tell too many untruths and don't see the bigger implications. So it goes back to where we started about the importance of telling the truth about what happens to people.
Well, thank you very much for the inspiration and the challenge, and thanks also for what you've done here in Parliament over the years. You've been a great warrior. I know there have been times when we haven't always agreed. I think there were a few things at the time of the federal intervention or whatever, but your door has always been open. You've always been respectful and fearless in pursuing what you've seen as is essential in terms of public policy for those who miss out most in our society. So thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Appreciate it. All the very, very best to everyone.
Thank you.